Well, today's subject is evolution versus creation. I'm very excited to be talking about this to you. I've done research for years on this, and this is a passionate subject for me because I grew up believing in evolution. Through my teenage years, I was an evolutionist. And if scientists, if the schools I was going to were telling me, I went to public schools, that this was the truth, who was I to question it? The majority of people I meet, even today, at work and social circles, believe in some form of evolution. The Christian world is embracing evolution, believe it or not, if you don't know, with movements like theistic evolution, progressive creation. They're saying Genesis 1 could not have possibly happened literally. The three angels' message, one of God's final messages to us, says, "Fear God and give him glory, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made the heavens and the earth and the sea and the fountains of waters." Why did God emphasize that he made everything at the end? Why is this such an important issue? If you don't believe in Genesis 1 literally, if you don't believe in that creative power, that God could do this in 6 days, you won't believe that he can create in you today. If you don't have that kind of faith, you won't believe he can recreate. So we're going to go over some of the standard arguments for evolution that are circulating today. We're going to go over the most modern arguments. There might be a few surprises for some of you. And lastly, we're going to go over what I think is the overwhelming evidence for creation. So the theory of evolution. What is missing? Well, there are a lot of arguments we could go over, but there's a lot I would like to cover today, and there's just not enough time. And the limited time we have, I'm going to try to go over as much as I can, and I'm going to try to go as fast as I can. So the best way to defeat Darwinism Darwinism meaning evolution, is with Darwin's writings himself. The Origin of the Species is the book that started it all. Darwin admits the main problem with his theory. We don't even have to try to figure out what it is he's going to tell us. Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic chain. And this perhaps is the most obvious and gravest objection which can be urged against my theory. The explanation lies, as I believe, in the extreme imperfection of the geologic record. So what is he talking about here? He's talking about macroevolution, and we're going to delineate in a minute between macro and microevolution. He's talking about macroevolution teaches we all evolved from lower forms of life. Fish from reptiles, dinosaurs from birds, monkeys from humans. And what Darwin is saying here is the reason we haven't found any missing links, or transitional forms is what they're called, is because we haven't been digging long enough. And the problem is now they've been digging feverishly for over 158 years, and they have found absolutely nothing. Colin Patterson, he was the senior paleontologist at the British Museum of Natural History, said, speaking of transitional forms, there is not one such fossil for which one can make a watertight argument. Professor Stephen Gould, he's a widely read evolutionist author, said the extreme rarity of transitional forms in the fossil record persists as the trade secret of paleontology. Well, evolutionists have told us they've found missing links, so let's examine some of them quickly in date order. Neanderthal man, 1856 he was found. Now keep in mind, out of everything we're going to go over here quickly, Neanderthal man was the only actual complete specimen, and Neanderthal man is the only one they will still talk about today. He was described as having brain capacity 13% larger than ours. He stood about 5'9". He had advanced tools. He buried his dead. Here's a picture of Neanderthal. What does Neanderthal man look like to you? Does he look like evidence of one species transforming into another species? They can call it whatever fancy name they want. That's a human. All right, Java man. Found in 1892, a guy named Eugene Debo went to Indonesia with the express purpose of finding the missing link. He started digging in a riverbed and he found a thigh bone, a skull cap, and some teeth. And then the proclamation was made, missing link found. Well, Debo found something else too. He tried to hide it for as long as he could. You could say he had some skeletons in his closet. He found multiple humans at the same site, which negated the find, and he was declared a fraud. Piltdown man. A section of skull, jawbone, and some teeth were found in England. They seem to indicate a missing link with a very unhuman-like skull. Let's take a look. Doesn't look quite right, right? Well, I don't have the date, but they discovered he had completely altered this skull and created it himself. He was a fraud. Nebraska man's my favorite. Nebraska man found in 1922. Nebraska man was constructed from a single tooth. Well, later they found out it was a tooth of an extinct pig. You know, Nebraska man was deemed credible for 5 years in the scientific community, but how many of you have still read about him in a textbook? Or you know that name, right? I should tell you something about what's happening in the evolutionist community. Australopithecines, Lucy, you've probably all heard of Lucy. In Africa, a small ape-like skull was found, and they declared, again, missing link found, but in 1974, they found the rest of her, and she was concluded to come from an extinct ape group. And lastly, Ramapithecus. Jaw and teeth fragments were found in northern India. Again, they made the announcement quickly, but later in 1976, they found the complete jaw, and it was classified as an orangutan. So do we notice a theme here? A small piece of bone, some teeth are found, and we are going to just jump to the wildest conclusions. But how many people think about it were deceived for their entire lives during these time periods? Oh, I'd become a Christian, but you know, they found Nebraska man. It's sad. Well, microevolution, you know, as they lose this transitional form argument, and evolutionists admit that they don't have any transitional forms, they'll say microevolution is evidence of our theory. Well, that's disingenuous. Microevolution is a species adapting to its environment. That's very different from macroevolution, which is one species turning into another species. Microevolution is insects adapting to pesticides, sparrows in North America growing bigger than sparrows in the South because it's colder in North America. I think we have over 300 recognized dog breeds at the moment. We all believe in microevolution. It actually glorifies the maker, whose design is so amazing it can actually adapt to its own environment. I mean, when is the last time that man has made something that could adapt to its environment? Remind your evolutionist friends, microevolution is a sign of intelligence, not mindless accident. So frustrated with their inability to find that transitional form, they came up with a whopper of a theory, the theory of punctuated equilibrium. They say one species spontaneously birthed another. Well, it must have happened a lot. Evolution has metastasized itself onto legitimate science. That's what's really happened here. You know, I studied science my whole life. I absolutely love science. But we found that evolution can teach some pretty unscientific things. The March of Progress, you've probably all seen this or some reference to it in modern culture. It's pretty much permeated the culture in every way. This is probably the most influential drawing that was ever done for the theory of evolution, and for a lot of people, when they saw this, it just kind of clicked. One look, and they became diehard evolutionists. Now, what this actually is, though, is just a very imaginative picture drawn by a guy named Rudolf Zeilinger. Rudolf Zeilinger was a good artist, but he had no background in science in any way. In 1956, this was a sensation. It changed the world, but by 2012, the Boston Globe said it fails as science. Radiometric dating. It's intimidating, right? It's hard to even say the name. Well, evolutionists say creation is wrong because we can date these rocks to millions and billions of years old. Creationists insist the Earth is around 6,000 years old based on the genealogies we can get from the Bible. So there's 4 types of dating, and we could spend the whole thing on this. But let me just give you one example. We've got an explosion up there. Anyone know what that is? Mount St. Helens. Mount St. Helens erupted on May 18th, 1980. I think we know I'm not making that up. Some of us probably watched it on television. I remember it. In 1992, scientists collected new rock from the post-eruption lava dome that forms after the eruption. They sent it to Geochron Labs, Cambridge, Massachusetts, a very well-respected radiometric dating lab. They used the potassium-argon method to date it. Now, they didn't have all the details on the specimen, but they dated it, and what do you think was the result? It said 340,000 to 2.8 million years old, and that rock was 12 years old when they dated it. Oops, but they didn't know that. Well, with the exception of some carbon-14 dating that, by the way, gives the youngest dates of all, that's one of the 4 methods, radiometric dating is meaningless. Catastrophicism versus uniformitarianism. No matter where you come from, religion, culture, creed, there are really only two options for you to believe in when you look at the outside world. You can either believe that there was catastrophicism, a global catastrophe, or you can believe in uniformitarianism, which is very, very slow change over millions and millions of years. Now, the creationists, we believe in catastrophicism. There was a worldwide flood, Noah's flood in the Bible. The waters of the deep opened up, and it destroyed everything. Or you can believe in uniformitarianism, which is what you're seeing as a result of billions of years of slow change. Now, the only thing you need to know here is evolutionists say they believe in uniformitarianism. They don't. What is the one event that evolutionists always emphasize, the most important event that ever happened on the planet? They call it the Chicxulub event. To quote National Geographic, 66 million years ago, while dinosaurs fed in primordial swamps, an asteroid the size of a mountain slammed into Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. The resulting explosion was equivalent to 100 trillion tons of TNT. Everything within 115 miles was vaporized. Now listen closely to what they believe. After the fire comes the flood. Depending on local topography, this explosion, I'm quoting, could have sent up a phenomenal tsunami up to 1,000 feet high. So wait a minute. They do believe what they're seeing is a result of water damage, a flood, just not Noah's flood from the Bible. When I leave the parking lots, pavement, when I get out in the natural world, when I leave everything that man has altered, it's just intuitive, friends, that there was a worldwide flood. The Big Bang. To quote National Geographic again, before the Big Bang, there was nothing, literally nothing. Then one day, 13.7 billion years ago, I want you to remember that date, we're going to get back to that. Boom, nothing created all the matter we see in the universe today. Well, first of all, I wasn't aware that nothing could create. It seems once again we're all kind of believing the same thing here, though, that there was a creation event. Evolutionists just believe that nothing did it. If you can believe that, friends, is it so hard to believe that something intelligent and powerful did it? Well, it says nothing created all the matter we see in the universe today. Well, it's a lot of matter. The Milky Way galaxy has 100 billion stars and galaxies in it alone. There's so much matter out there in the universe that each person on this planet could have 11 trillion stars assigned to them individually. That's a lot of matter to have come from nowhere by random chance without anyone overseeing or controlling it. Think about this too. If there was a Big Bang explosion, all the matter would be moving in the same direction from the result of the explosion. Scientists acknowledge this. They call this the theory of conservation of angular momentum. It's a well-known scientific theory, but what they don't like to talk about is then why do Venus and Uranus rotate backwards from the other planets? Additionally, Jupiter and Neptune all have moons rotating backwards. Another problem for the Big Bang is the horizon problem. If there was a Big Bang explosion or expansion, it would be hotter closer to the source and colder further away. And what we find instead is scientists can measure this very accurately. There's a uniform temperature everywhere throughout the universe. So they say the Big Bang happened 13.7 billion years ago, but they have acknowledged in writing that is not enough time to reach this uniform temperature throughout the universe. There's our temperature gauge. Well, let's switch gears here a little bit. There's unfortunately an uglier side to this. And if you do believe in evolution, I do not wish to offend you, but I believe God wants me to speak the truth. And truth is truth, even if it's been buried for 150 years. It doesn't make it any less true. Most people just don't realize how racist evolution is. This is the book, The Origin of Species, published 1859 by Charles Darwin. It's the book that started it all. Well, that was not the original title. Were you aware they had to change the title of the book? The original title up here is On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, right? Favored races, what did he mean by that? Well, Darwin would have been happy to tell you. In fact, he wrote extensively on his racist beliefs and theories. Most of the quotes are way too offensive. I don't want to get into that. But I will read one quote from a subsequent book, Descent of Man. Darwin says, "The Western nations of Europe now so immeasurably surpass their former savage progenitors that they stand at the summit of civilization. The civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world." And by the way, he thought that was a good thing. Another quote from Phil Moore. Christian reformers had spent decades in the early 19th century teaching Britain to view non-European races as their equals before God. In a matter of years, Darwin swept not only God off the table, but also the value of people of every race with him. You know, I am so proud, friends, to follow this book, which was started being written over 4,000 years ago, and by the way, has never had to be changed. And Revelation 7:9 tells us exactly what God thinks of racism. "After this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and tongues and peoples, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hands." Racism clearly has no place in heaven, and whether you're Christian or not, do you want to have anything to do with anything that advocates racism? I don't. Well, what are today's arguments? What are they teaching our kids today? What will you encounter if you meet an evolutionist today? This first one surprised me quite a bit. It's struck into the heart of my own family. I have 3 kids in public school, and my eldest was taught this last year, and we got into quite a few arguments over it. Well, they are teaching our kids that there are vestigial femurs on all whales, which means that whales used to walk on land. This is now one of the leading arguments for evolution. I'm not joking. Well, a lot of research had to be done to determine where this came from. This originated from a book called The Dinosaur Heresies by Robert Baker, written in the 80s. He quotes page 317. It says, "Every once in a while, a modern whale is hauled in with a hind leg, complete with thigh and knee muscles." Well, Creation Ministries International pressed Baker for his sources. Eventually, he gave a book by E.J. Slipper called Whales. On page 423 of that book, it records an incident at Uyakawawa Whaling Station in 1956. A Greenland right whale was pulled in with bony disease, and it had a 12-inch pelvic bone on one side. Did it say it came in with a hind leg with thigh and knee muscles? That was his source. The story changed. You know how big a Greenland right whale is? It can be up to 59 feet long and weigh up to 100 tons. And the evidence we're supposed to believe that these whales used to walk on land is a 12-inch pelvic bone was found on one side on one whale in the 1950s, and it had a disease. Human chromosome number 2 fusion. This concept is the one that the leading evolutionist spokesman, Richard Dawkins up there, he says he's the most excited about, and it constitutes the most compelling argument that evolution has ever had. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on this. The argument here is they say apes have 48 chromosomes and we have 46 chromosomes, which is true. They say there was once an ape where 2 of its chromosomes fused together into one, leaving 46 chromosomes in its descendant, us. They say they can see the site where this happened on human chromosome number 2. Let me try my, there we go. Second from the top. They're literally leaving all on the table on this. The theory of evolution lives or dies on this. They say, Kenneth Miller, the leading evolutionist spokesman, what must have happened is that one pair of chromosomes must have gotten fused. So we should be able to look at our genome and discover that one of our chromosomes resulted from the fusion of 2 primate chromosomes. So we should be able to look around our genome, and you know what? If we don't find it, evolution is wrong. We don't share a common ancestor. Well, let's talk about our chromosomes for a minute. Chromosomes consist of a telomere at the end, these little purple guys, and a centromere in the middle. And the telomeres contain around 15,000 bases of sequence. This is the ATGC nucleotides, the code that made you what you are. Now picture my finger is the chromosome, and my fingernail is the telomere. Now if 2 chromosomes came and fused together, telomere would mate with telomere. Each telomere had 15,000 bases of sequence. How many would we be expecting? How many bases of sequence would we be expecting to find if they came together? 30,000. Well, they tested the site, and it has 800. See, what the evolutionists won't tell you is it turns out these telomere fusion sites are actually quite common in the genome. They're performing actual functions. They kind of jump the gun. They're causing genes to be copied into RNA, and new research is showing these sites are so critical for how you grew and developed that it would just make no sense that these sites that are working for us to help us grow slam together when those two functioning chromosomes were already working. It just takes a very simplistic view of how complicated DNA and chromosomes really are. The distant starlight issue, I'm curious, has anyone heard of this? Distant, yes, all right. This is another leading argument, and sadly I've seen creationist debaters stumped completely by this in front of live audiences. So here's the argument. Through the Hubble Space Telescope, we can now see billions of light years away. So evolutionists believe that the light you are seeing when you look up took billions of years to get here. They say when you look up at the night sky, the light you're seeing is billions of years old. And since the Bible indicates the stars were created around 6,000 years ago, they say Genesis 1 is wrong, and we have a distant starlight problem. Well, one theory that creates a problem for this is gravitational time dilation. Is time the same everywhere in the universe? Is time absolute? Actually, no, it is not at all. See, the idea is that the universe could have aged billions of years while only 6,000 years have elapsed here on Earth. Picture a clock ticking very slowly on Earth. That same clock, if it was put in Alpha Centauri, say, it would be going like this. General relativity has shown that time is affected by gravitational potential. That clock will tick slower when exposed to greater gravity. And we can see that here on Earth, that a clock at sea level will tick slower than a clock at Mount Everest because that clock at sea level is exposed to greater gravity. And if Earth is in a more dense gravitational field, which I personally believe it is, time would move more slowly here. But ultimately, what the evolutionists won't tell you is that the Big Bang Theory has the exact same distant starlight problem they just told us creation has. Do you know how far we can see out? We can see 78 billion light years in all directions. And the evolutionists just told us the Big Bang happened 13.7 billion years ago, right? They stand firmly behind that number. So do we see an immediate problem? This means they believe that light is able to travel at least 78 billion light years in only 13.7 billion years. So you see, we actually all agree that light travels at a distance that is much, 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 much greater than the actual time in years. So the distant starlight problem is not a valid argument against creation because it's a great argument against the Big Bang. You just can't have it both ways. But the bottom line is we just do not understand fully the phenomenon of starlight. Cosmology and astronomy is having a crisis right now, and their crisis is over the expansion of the universe. They can't figure out how it's happening. God told us how it was happening. 3 times in the Bible, it says God stretched out the heavens. He did it. If the heavens were stretched out, what does that imply? They are now further away than they must have been at some point in the past. So that distant starlight that we're seeing is not as far away as it was back then, not as far away as it is now. Well, my favorite part, the overwhelming evidence for God, the evidence for intelligent design. I believe it falls into 2 categories. The Bible will explain them to us. Psalm 19:1, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. That's outer space. Psalm 139:14, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. That's inner space. Did you ever wonder, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Did you ever wonder, what about people who never read or saw a Bible? Do they have a chance? This verse indicates to me that a person could know and glorify God without ever being exposed to that just by looking up. And that's good news. So let's talk about the stars. The furthest object man-made out in space right now is Voyager 1. It's been traveling at 11 miles a second. Try to picture that. They left Earth in 1977, and it is 11.7 billion miles from Earth currently. To give you some perspective, Pluto is about 7 billion miles from Earth. There's a picture, it's hard to see. Voyager 1 took of us, or that circle there in the middle. Once we leave our solar system, Oh, the point I wanted to make, we'll go back. Even at that 11 miles a second, it's been going about 44 years, it won't leave the official edge of our solar system for 30,000 years. That's how big our solar system is. The next closest object after we leave our solar system is Proxima Centauri. It's 4.24 light years away. If Voyager 1 could reach that, it would take it 70,000 years. That's the next closest object outside of our solar system. Zooming out further, we have the Milky Way galaxy. We're on the Sagittarius arm, about halfway down. There we are. The Milky Way galaxy spans 100,000 light years, and it has 100 billion planets and stars within it. You know, all you see when you look up at the night sky is you see a tiny little patch right here of the Sagittarius arm of our Milky Way galaxy, our tiny galaxy. I say tiny because if we zoom out further, there we are, we have what's called the local group. The local group is comprised of about 54 Milky Way-sized galaxies, and it's 10 million light years across. Zooming out again, we have what's called the Virgo supercluster. It has 100 other groups, just like our group. That's 5,400 Milky Way-sized galaxies. I don't know about you, but I'm starting to feel small. It's a mind-numbing 110 million light years across. We can zoom out again. We have what's called the Laniakea supercluster. It's home to the Milky Way galaxy plus 100,000 other galaxies, and it's a mind-numbing 520 million light years across. That's got to be it, right? No, we're just a speck. That Laniakea supercluster is a speck on the observable universe that we can even see, which contains over 2 trillion galaxies. They've calculated it's more than all the grain sands on Earth. And what lies beyond, well, we really cannot imagine. The scope of this, I don't know, if you didn't have God, it would give me anxiety. Creationist debater Kent Hovind says, if there is no God, we're in trouble. We're hurtling through space right now around the sun at 66,000 miles per hour and nobody's in charge. But if God made this world, that means he owns it. Friends, I take comfort because we're only here because God put us here. This is his planet. Amen. Well, Psalm 139:14. This was the other way we can glorify God. It says, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. Your own body that you see every day and that you take for granted provides the greatest evidence of all of God. This guy's pretty smart, right? Bill Gates said human DNA is like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any software ever created. So where's our software? In these, you have around 200 trillion cells within your body. The DNA or software is in those cells, and almost all your cells will be replaced at some point in your life. In fact, some of them are being replaced constantly. And here's the thing, when a cell is replaced, the DNA inside it has to be copied, ripped apart.